Now. Okay. Welcome to Agile Ontario Meetup. I am not the organizer. If you're new to Agile Ontario, Adita is, and that's what she looks like if you don't know who she is. She is actually delivering training right now, and she told me to start without her, and she will join us when she is done. So this is another Friends from World series. Today we bring you Gabrielle Benefield as she introduces us to Mobius Loop and the Mobius Navigator. As she mentioned earlier, she is exiled in the UK at the moment. Now, Gabrielle doesn't like to talk about herself, so let me do that for her. I'm probably going to embarrass her quite a bit since she has absolutely no idea what I'm going to say. But then I've known Gabby for almost 20 years, so So Gabby is one of the most highly respected and celebrated individuals across the Agile world, making significant contributions to the 20-year journey that the Agile movement has been on so far. In fact, she's one of the key influencers on the panel to help kick off the month-long Agile 20 Reflect Festival, which starts on February 1st, which is next Monday. She's an author, speaker, innovator, and founder of MobiusLoop.com, and she is passionate about taking Mobius to the world. Her contact information is on the slide. Today, we also have two facilitators helping her, Manwei Chong, which is me, and JF Unsen. You can also find our contact info on our slide. So without further ado, let's find out what Mobius is. Gabby, the floor is all yours.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. Might be the nicest one I've ever had. All right, let's get going. Let's double check everyone can see my screen when I go into present mode. Thumbs up, everybody good? We can see that. Okay, great. All right, so let's get started. I love this story. So I came across this. If you're wondering what that is, it's the hallway, a corridor of an old Victorian school. So we've got a few people from London, and you may have run across Victorian architecture before, but the buildings are very narrow. You've got sort of longer rectangular rooms, and corridors are quite narrow as well. Anyway, one of these Victorian buildings housed a school in the UK, and they had a problem. When the school bell would ring, the children would pour out into the hallways. They would be rushing to get to the next class. That would create a lot of congestion. People would start jostling each other, bullying and fights would break out. So the school asked around to start getting quotes, because what they wanted to do was to make the corridors wider to avoid this congestion problem. So they started getting a short list, and they got it down. They thought it would cost about £20 million to redesign, redo the architecture and build for this. So they got different architecture firms to bid on it. And one of them, Alistair Parvin, was part of this architecture firm in the UK, came in and looked at the problem. So sure enough, the bell would ring, the children would pour out, fighting would break out, congestion, etc. Then they stopped and they thought about the problem. They thought, well, let's run a different experiment. So they went to the hardware store and bought up a bunch of individual bells. They put them in each classroom, and it was up to the teacher to set off that bell when the time for the next class would start. And sure enough, when they did that, not everybody would start it on time. They're finishing what they were talking about. And so just that slight delay meant that when all the children came out, no more congestion, no more bullying or fights. So they managed to save what was going to be a £20 million project and turn it into something that cost, let's say, £500 for the bells. So this is a classic, what we all want to be doing. We want to understand the problems deeply enough so we can find these really interesting, clever solutions. So finding a way to maximize the outcomes by minimizing the outputs. We want to do the least amount possible to get us to our desired goal. And while we all want to do this, there's something that often stops us. So I've been, as Munwei said, in Agile for a very long time. And I think the thing, not just in what's going on in any organization at the moment, is we have a lot of pressure. So I think in the old days when we were delivering in very traditional ways, it was all about delivering function points to a deadline, to a milestone. we switched that over to new agile language around delivering lots of points, having more and more velocity. And all this really was about creating more faster. And if you think that's a good idea, I really love the analogy of a remote control. If more was a better thing, then on our TV remotes, we would add more buttons. In fact, we could have a fantastic startup. You know how you buy a printer and then you have to buy the peripherals. So the printers aren't so expensive, but you buy toner, paper, etc. And we could do the same with remotes. Imagine that was our value proposition. We're going to sell a really cheap remote, but you can buy new buttons for it. Anyone think that's a great idea? Right? We're all like, oh, Robert, I don't think so. Maybe. Super geeks, he can't talk, keep him muted. It's the best place for him. No, we really don't want more buttons. And in fact, this next picture I love. It's one of my all-time favorite photos. So this guy was going to his grandmother's place and they were sitting down watching television. And his grandmother keeps getting up and changing the channel. And he says to her, why don't you use the TV remote? And she looks at him and she said, it's just too hard to use. I can't figure out what most of the buttons are for. So the grandson, obviously a UX genius, fixed the problem. And this is how he fixed it. So if this was our products, all of our products on the market, or any products we use, this is about removing the inessential so the essential can speak. So this is about removing all the things we don't need, but letting us get the job done faster and better. And if we could just design our products, I think the world would be a better place if we could do it this way. So to help with this, we're always looking for the new cure. Every day it seems like there's another framework coming on the market. We've got Agile, then we've got Kanban and continuous delivery, Scrum. And don't get me started on the latest, greatest scaling framework, right? We just have more and more things every day. And it's not that any of them are bad. We just have a lot of complexity. Imagine being an organization. You hear of all these buzzwords, but it's quite overwhelming to understand which ones should we apply, what is the difference, which ones will help me solve my problems. And what I see is that there's different flavors of them. For example, I've got what I call the kind of left loop thinkers. They're all about deep discovery. So they're about designing our business models, design thinking, strategy 1,000.0. I see a lot of different dot models coming out. But one problem is you risk getting stuck in the theory. You risk getting stuck in design. I see this all too often, that we're trying to come up with a perfect strategy. And sometimes we just don't get going enough. On the other side, a lot of Agilists are very familiar with this. We're all about delivering features rapidly. That's not the intention of Agile. It never has been. But when I speak to many execs, they say ultimately they want to deliver more features faster. And the problem with that is that you risk building the wrong thing faster. Okay, that might be better than building the wrong thing slowly, but we'd rather be a little better at setting the direction. So what we really need is this idea of balancing these different worlds, creating a cohesive, holistic approach. So I'm going to take you through the core of Mobius. This is a pattern we use. These are the core activities. However, I'm going to say up front, this is the training wheels view. This is when you get started. These are prompts and reminders of what you want to be doing. However, it's not meant to be linear. You can start anywhere in the loop. You move around it as needed. So the first question when I go in, I've got people saying to me, we want to be Agile. Let's do Agile. And I'm like, great, that sounds fantastic. What are you building? Why are you building it? Oh, so that's a really, obvious question, but why are we doing it? Who are we doing it for? Then we don't take that at face value. We want to go out and understand what's really going on. So this is whether we gather data, get some concrete evidence behind us. Out of that, we create our outcomes. Outcomes are really setting our destination. What's the change? How will we know that we've achieved something great? Then in the middle, we go through this idea of generating the options. So instead of going from problem to solution, we want to understand deeply. Then we generate our ideas. We decide how we're going to deliver them. So take your outcomes, and this is about coming up with concrete actions, ways that you can test and validate them fast. We get them ready, so we prioritize, and this should always be prioritized based on what's the impact we want them to make. So what's the least effort to get us to the maximum outcomes possible. Then the right loop's going to be very familiar to the Agilists in the group. This is about where we create experiments, we deliver to customers. We do this rapidly. We measure what really happened. So as we go through, did we really make a difference towards the outcomes, or did we just deliver a lot of stuff that no one's ever going to use? And we have this continuous learning. Why we have this Mobius shape is that we really want to be able to get people to take that learning. We don't want to just deliver something and that's the end of the journey. We take that learning, and based on that, we adapt. So we might say, hey, that was a great experiment. It paid off. Let's do more. Let's deliver on the right loop. Or we might say, we didn't really understand that very well. We need to do a bit more discovery. So we're going to go back and forth around this loop and jump around as needed. But we're trying to generate that core understanding of why into the how we do it. And what Mobius does, it's a slightly different model. It's not meant to replace anything you have. It's a way of connecting what's out there in a cohesive way. So all of those different frameworks and methods we can easily use with mobile. So it's a way of bringing this into organizations, creating some clarity, connecting them in, and making them make sense. And if you look at it, just step back, this is a way of having this idea of emergent strategy. So we don't just have one strategy, we do it up front. That's emergent. We're going to keep making that clearer and get more understanding as we go through, coupled with our brilliant rapid delivery of Agile. So you can use the same pattern for strategy, products, services, operations, even life hacking. JF was one of the first people who started using this to hack his own life, what he'd do with his career, what were his life ambitions. So we see this used for a lot of different things. Here you're seeing Red Hat's been a huge adopter of it. They use it with all the different clients. They use it internally for all their work. That was a workshop we had at Google. Through to one of my favorite uses is a guy called Kabir Shirazi, and we're going to be having a talk with him in the next couple of months. He's gone into places like Pakistan and Yemen, literally in a war zone, and he uses this to create social entrepreneurs. His whole idea is to create peace through creating a more prosperous society. So if you take these street sellers, give them the tools to improve their businesses, and he uses Mobius to do that, Mobius and Agile, then you can create a better society. It's open source, so parts of it are open source. We try to make it so we can be accessible. So, people without a lot of means, like the people in Pakistan and Yemen, can easily access it. So we have these big visual maps. It's a highly visual language that we create with Mobius. So these we put up, we call this, it's more like an ultimate Kanban. So it gives you the big picture where you connect all of your strategy and discovery, create the options, through to delivery on the right. And what's nice is you can create your own journey. There's a lot of different practices and tools out there. The trigger cards we use, really they were designed for forgetful coaches. That's why I designed them. So I put them together so they made it easier for us to design our workshops. So you can see them here where each of these areas within our visual maps, we can use these trigger cards to help us design them. So I'm going to take you through a really super fast, high-level walkthrough of using this with a customer, one of the very earliest adopters of Mobius. So this was for Aarhus Health Municipality in Denmark. So they wanted to replace their existing healthcare service. So we started with the why, which is for them, they had many complaints and problems. It wasn't scalable. They had so many defects. While it had been developed with a traditional contract model, fixed price, fixed scope up front, while that had been delivered, it just never really worked. Everybody hated it. So they got to a point where they just went, that's it, we're going to replace the whole thing. So rather than do the same thing again, they wanted to take an outcome-based approach. So when we went in, we were looking at, this was for elder citizens. So when you get to be over 65 years of age, I believe it is, you get all these extra services, you get extra care, people visit you, give you all the things you need. So we designed it with the end users in mind and all the carers who be using the system. So we went into discovery. This is where, I won't go through everything, we did a lot where you gather a lot of data you go out and see firsthand. And we took this from being shadowing the carers, where we had the user experience design people going out. We got I love this picture because it shows Torben's the guy on the left standing there. He's the product owner. Jesper's the one sitting down. He's the architect. And the two women are user experience design people. And we started from them doing the research, then getting the team to start telling the stories back to understand it in the scenarios, to actually getting the entire development team to go out into the field and see the stuff firsthand. So this is really a way of creating that deep understanding. So when we talk about discovery, we really want to make sure people understand the problems before we start building them. This is one of my favorite program managers, Esben. He's the coolest customer you could ever have. He, when he moved into the suppliers organization, so his whole team for Aarhus Health actually physically relocated to work with suppliers. He actually gave up his day job. He said, I'm not going to have a job. I'm going to wander around. When people need help, I'll be there to answer questions. Like, brilliant leadership style. And the big problem he was having is that for many years, this is early outcomes. So back in the day, you know, it was about 2011, I suppose, I started really talking about outcomes a lot, and people kept just not really understanding what they were. And he was one of the first sort of people interested in doing an outcome-based contract. And when he put this out, all these suppliers who said they would do outcomes didn't know the first thing about it. But this was the important thing. How do we create a more outcome-driven contract and product that works for our customers? So you'll see there, we started with really high-level things. I won't go through all the details, but things like taking happy carers, zero problems. How do you take those really fairly intangible outcomes, structure them into a language, and create your entire product model around that? So that's what we did. So we used a combination of deep discovery data. So this meant we were actually moving back around this discovery loop to get more clarity, getting that really nailed down. And then we were at the same time simultaneously actually building out the structure of what we were doing. So we'd take things like, I'm using a really simple outcome, but let's say we wanted to reduce the time to create a report. So it was just really complex usability. And we could have a lot of hypotheses why we believe that was so based on our deep discovery. And then out of that, we could create what I call, it's really red, research, experiments, or deliver. You're going to break things down because what we want to do is find the fastest, cheapest way to validate these ideas rather than pushing the features out. Back to the remote control, right? I don't ever want to build those extra buttons in that no one's ever going to need. And so this is a danger. It's a risk with agile teams. We get really good and really fast at delivering a lot, but that's kind of a trap. Because it's so easy, we don't often think, should these things ever go out, or are we simply creating more complexity for our customers? So a little bit of research, running some experiments can give us that data before we have to fully commit. But if something's going to make a big difference to the outcomes, we know it's something useful, it's low risk, we can push that out. So then we go through, we're always prioritizing what's the impact on our outcomes versus the ease, the complexity of doing that. And as you can see, just looking at this, one of the things you want to do to get this into organizations is make it really fun, make it super visual, make it easy for people to get this done, that they can all collaborate. And then, you know, getting back to, this looks very back to our sort of agile delivery. This is all about laying things out. What are the things we need to do in that more agile roadmap? Measuring the impact, I can't, yeah, it's a lot of detail to show you how we were measuring all the outcomes, but we were, everything should be measurable. So is this going to get to a threshold that's worth pushing it out or not? Sorry that that's a lot of information, and this is actually a simplified view, but just showing you the end-to-end flow. So taking all of this across from this initial idea, what's our strategy, why are we doing this, all the way to making it into actionable delivery. Lately, I've been running these 3 to 4 hour workshops where I just put these 3 maps up. I go and sometimes cold. I might have a, let's say, an hour conversation with customers. And within 3 to 4 hours, we can actually get this whole end-to-end thing laid out. It's kind of like an amazing magic trick. It's my favorite thing to do. We can just make this so visual and clear that you go from, all those conversations, what are we doing? Let's plan everything out to the nth degree. We're all about Mobius's momentum. We want to take those problems, get the outcomes clear enough, but within each week, we want to say, what can we do that's going to move us forward towards the outcomes? Okay, so that's your whistle-stop tour of Mobius, and I'm going to hand back over to Minwei and Jeff.
Okay, so for us to actually learn more about Mobius, I think we need to actually roll up our sleeves and get our hands dirty. So let's play a game, shall we? We will be using Miro for this game. Let me put the URL in the chat. It's right here. So now that you've learned about the loop and the 10 activities that Gabby actually went through really quickly, let's see if you can actually map these tasks to those activities. You may do some of those tasks throughout the loop. However, we would like you to put them where you first do them. That's why those tasks are actually called trigger cards. We're going to send you out to breakout rooms, about 4 to 5 people per room. Please pay attention to your room number because your room number will correspond to the game board number where your team will be playing. You see on the game board a Mobius loop, and the trigger cards are arranged around the Mobius loop like a frame. So just move the trigger cards to the section of the loop where you would first do them. So we'll give you 20 minutes and we'll come back to debrief afterwards. JF, are we ready to break out?
Yes, I'm ready. And I'm starting to see people on the Miro board. Not everyone yet is on there though. So. Okay,
so they can get to the Miro when you get into the room.
Oh, hold on, we have a couple of people dropped out. I might need to recreate the rooms. I just noticed they dropped out. Recreating, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right, so while JF is recreating the room, let me just explain a little bit more. So the trigger cards that you would see, so please do get on the Miro board now. And when you get on there, you should be able to go to the game board. There's different numbers that will correspond to your Zoom room number very soon. And you see the loop that Gabby actually mentioned. Now you see all the purple things like the frame. Each of them are actually called trigger cards, but if you look at what those are actually different tasks that you actually would do throughout the loop. So what we would like you to do is to put those cards into which section of the loop do you think that it should be that you would first do them? So, okay?
All right. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Miro, there's a quick way to jump into the board. If you're not familiar, let me just share my screen so you can see that. So hold on for a second. I'm sharing my screen. So here is the Miro board. And what you can do is when you see this Miro screen, at the bottom left, you should see this little icon that looks like a square with lines in it. That gives you the outline and you can just jump from board to board. So if you're in room 3, just jump to board 3. So having said that, I am ready to open the breakout rooms. Are there any questions before we do that?
Yeah.
No questions?
I might be the only person, but I don't see anything that you are sharing on your screen when I've used the link. Maybe I've done it wrong.
Oh, I finished sharing already. Sorry.
No, Araceli, if you move around the board, when I went to a blank screen and you'll find everything to the right, just you can zoom in or out. I don't know what machine you're on, but.
Okay.
In my bottom left-hand corner, there was 2 little arrows, and I had to push on that.
I can see that now. Okay, yes,
okay,
yes.
Cool.
Thank you, sorry.
No problem.
So
All right.
have you seen the outline so you can get to the board you're meant to be on? Because once you get to the room, you'll want to click on that to get to the right board for your team.
Well, I have an annoying thing on top. I will skip this, and I guess I hope my new classmates will help me.
Okay.
We're around to help you too. Just yell out if anyone needs help.
All right.
All right. So we will give you 20 minutes in the room. So have fun.
All right. Here we hold on for a second. What happened? Here we go. Open all rooms.
Yay.
See you. People are going in. All right. And Gabby Moonway, you should be able to go into the rooms and check up on them.
JF, please pause recording.
Hold on. Starting recording.
Welcome back. I hope you guys have fun. Let's see, is everybody back yet? I think there's...
Yeah, it was fun.
We have everybody back, yes. Looks like
All right.
Could you reshare the link to the Miro board like another time in the chat?
Yes,
Because I don't
yes,
see it.
yes, of course. Sorry,
Thank you.
Joris.
Thank you.
Don't worry if you just joined, I'll do a little debrief and we can have a look. Okay.
All right. Gabby, all yours. Debrief.
Great. Hey, who wants to volunteer for me to look at their board and I can look at where things are? Who wants to be my volunteer team?
Go team 2.
Two.
Board number 2.
I left them on a cliffhanger. They're desperate to know because I went, oh, this looks good. Oh no, there's 3 that are wrong. Okay, so let's go through and talk about this. Everyone see my screen? Thumbs up. Yeah. Okay, so we start with why we're doing it, who we're doing it for. So we've got, the classic one for me, frame the problem. And all of these, when you get further into Mobius, each of the trigger cards, you turn it over. It just has some really obvious questions. Why are we doing this? What problem are we trying to solve? Who are we solving it for? What's the impact? Because I really want to understand which of the problems I want to go after. They're not all equal. I want to go after the biggest pain points. So that's good. Strategic intent and purpose. Yeah, now, because Mobius can be used for creating strategy, often we are using a lot of discovery to figure out what is our ultimate purpose. And again, it's emergent. You won't get that straight away. But if you're more at a product service level using this, then this might be something that's sort of handed down that you have through the organization, and you're trying to link your product or service strategy up to the strategic purpose. Capturing customer motivation. So while this is about why we're doing it and who we're doing it for, so that defining the customers and stakeholders is great, I find it's under discovery that I'm really understanding the motivations. So this is where I'm going to do things like interview the customers, use 5 whys. Constraints is a kind of weird one. To me, that lives all over the map. Now, just how I conceptualize of this is that often we would put the practice or the method where we first see it appear. So sometimes I get constraints like you've got this much money, this much time, there's a really hard constraint. But I find that constraints also live around under the options where we have design constraints, but I often put constraints up here because I just sometimes get handed them. I have to work within them. The design challenge, again, that's another framing of the problem, as it were. What's the challenge we're trying to solve? So I think that's good. So identifying assumptions, this came up with another team. So where I most use assumption tends to be around options, because I'm trying to make it concrete. That we come up with, people are saying, oh, well, we know these customers do this. I'm right, really? And I love saying to people, do you know, or do you think you know? Right? So it's a really good trigger. Do you know, or do you think you know? But I could actually give you that one. I'm going to give you a little bit of leeway. I'm going to put it over here because there are some assumptions that come up early on, that we have the people, we have the technology, we can do it. Does anyone know what a rewind the future session is? Anyone got an idea or want to hazard a guess?
Is it putting yourself into the future and thinking about what you did to get there?
Yeah, it's a way of imagining the best possible future and the worst possible future, and then working backwards to figure out the steps for what that would be. How much time have we got, JF?
You have about 20 minutes.
Okay, cool. Can I give you a really quick example? It's so funny. I just want to preface this with saying I'm probably a diabolical mother, and my son will spend years in therapy. And the reason I say that is one day he was slacking off. He was about, 12, 13, slacking off from school, and I wanted to terrify him into doing work. So we did one of these where he had to sketch out the best possible future. So the best possible future, he's like, oh, I can travel wherever I like. I have a house, good job. I have lots to do. I'm happy. So we worked backwards, which involved he got that because he had a really good job he loved. He got that because he studied really well at university. He got to university because he studied hard at school. So it all linked up. Then we did worst possible future. So apparently he drew himself behind bars. He was in prison, and he was in prison because he was dealing drugs. And he was dealing drugs because he couldn't afford his rent, because he worked in a takeaway shop and didn't earn much money. And he worked there because he didn't go to university, because he didn't finish high school, because he didn't study. So that terrified him. Apparently he still has nightmares. But that's kind of the idea. It's a way that when we're generating ideas, we start saying, well, imagine a perfect future. How would we get there? Versus what are the risks? What are the things that could prevent us? So it's a really nice way just to think through scenarios. What would that take? And work backwards from it. This one was one of the three. You guys had a 3 cluster I mentioned. So a trick with looking at this is look under the subtitle. So when you prioritize the options by impact, in the middle section, it's all about generating options. I use the word options instead of requirements because none of this is required. These are all our guesses, our hypotheses, if you want to use a fancier term. So these are all the potential solutions, but until we do something to validate them, we don't know. So I do the final, there's a bit of rough prioritization that happens here where we say, okay, well, here's our ideas. Which ones should we start breaking down to figure out how we can test them or deliver them? Then under refine, we're going to really start working out which ones do we take into delivery. All the outcome stuff, OKRs, quantifying, creating measurable outcomes belong there, great. Creating testable hypotheses, that belongs under our idea generation. And you've got all this ideation stuff, so you've done well there. All these different ways we can ideate, you can take many different techniques. What about this one, team? When you create a prototype to test an idea, look at the language. Creating a paper prototype, do you think that belongs in generating ideas, or where else could that belong? Everybody come off mute. We're such a small group. You can just chat, free form.
Yeah, we thought about that because it was not a deliverable. It's a prototype, it's a paper. We thought it belongs in this area here. So it's still
Yes.
discover and generate and all of that.
Prototyping is one of those really weird things because I actually use prototyping all the way back in discovery sometimes. I'm a big fan of build something really fast to get feedback.
Yeah.
Because I find if I build it, I can figure out all the bad things faster than if I theorize. So a lot of UX people will say, we do it over here. However, because it's an action, the way I think about it mentally is all my activities where I'm actually really constructing, building, I just throw in the right-hand loop because it helps. A lot of us are using Agile, Lean, Kanban, all these sorts of things. So when it's an activity where we're actually building it, I'm just going to throw it over here. But do understand that these are techniques you can use anywhere, but just kind of as a mental model, that's where I put it. Then under deciding how to deliver the options, great. So you got that, bang on. This is where you could do some research, run an experiment, or deliver it to people. And I like having that mental breakdown because I'm always looking for something fast to give me the information before I have to commit. But if it's worth committing, we do it fully. You're deciding which options to take into delivery. That one escaped my design test yesterday. It's really funny because you've got the image. This is why visual languages are really strong, almost subliminally, where subconsciously we're putting things where we can see the image. This one, deciding, I'm going to probably put it a little more closer to refine, or maybe it was meant to be near there. And someone asked earlier, they said, with one-liner that captures the essence of your idea, where does that live? Originally, someone had put that under the why, but what I've found myself is we have that kind of higher level, where are we going? But what happens while we're generating ideas, some sort of interesting theme or like a tagline comes out of it. So I'll give you an example. Working with a bank a couple of weeks ago, that we came up with one, which was look like a real bank, act like a neobank. And it was just such a good hook. It really summarized up this dichotomy between having this traditional culture that we're working within, but wanting to be this neo cool bank and disrupt everything. And that was what it was all about. We could actually use this and exploit it to our advantage. So that was a really cool one-liner. So to me, that belongs firmly in options. Now I find that works pretty well. And again, don't feel like if you go, I don't agree, that's fine. You know, this is all about you customizing for yourselves. So feel free to move these things around, but this is just, I have to put them somewhere. And when you get into the cards and things we use, they're color coded. So you can kind of make it easier to do this. Okay, then over here, this is all about, you know, we're in build mode. So we're designing experiments. We're synchronizing our activities with a daily stand-up. And someone sort of mentioned, well, hang on, aren't all these things, aren't we coordinating and learning all the way through? We sure are, but I'm seeing that right-hand stuff, that's where I'm bundling it, because we can see that looks almost like a iterative cycle. You know, it's easier for people to understand. Okay, we're in delivery mode. We're going to be doing these daily activities. And this, it's an interesting kind of model because if you start thinking of it, you can tell when people think of it as being linear, that they're going to stuck in big planning. Because in my first week, we're actually in delivery mode, right? We have to be in delivery mode. I go, what can we do this week? Even if it's getting some actionable research, some actionable prototypes and things like that. So when you see daily stand-ups, it's in green because we're doing that on day one, right? We're not stuck in discovery. You can't do that. You've got to think of it like a racetrack where cars are working simultaneously around the track. We're running experiments. It's around measure. I'm sort of writing up experiment results as we go. So yeah, that's probably a good place. Creating a visual outcome tracker. I'm going to use these trackers over here, but I'm actually usually building them over here. Because what happens is people come up with these kind of very, I don't know, texty OKRs and outcomes, and they're not very easy to see. So we create big arrows, things that we generate here, then we fill them in and keep them updated and measure. Okay. So I'm running tests around here, measuring things like conversions, analyzing results, and cohort, if you're not familiar, just think of it as a way of categorizing, looking for patterns by groupings, categories, people. Shadowing users to understand motivations. I've seen people put this here before. For me, like the Danish healthcare, I'm often doing shadowing over in discovery. However, I'm also using it here because as we're running it, I want to see what people are doing. So boom, boom, you can move that around. You know, we could even be really cool and duplicate it. There you go. Running retrospectives. Oh, holding reviews to get feedback, retros. Great. And adaptation. I love that you've got that. We're deciding if we discover more, deliver more, pivot, pivoting our idea. And here we are again, going back around the loop. So I noticed all the teams did really well. I jumped between the teams. I was quite impressed how pretty close to my version of right that you all got. But I'm going to hand it over to all of you for questions. Did you have some specific ones? And I'm happy to zoom in on your game boards. Or any that you're not familiar about, or any ideas that you counter and say, you know, you're completely wrong. This is why. Love that too. And feel free, everybody, come off mute. It'll be faster to ask.
I didn't really have a question. I just think this is really cool because what I'm finding is I have a lot of, I'm in a big organization. So there's a lot of like UX people and architect people who are like, we can't just be doing weekly sprints and delivering. We need some other thinking kind of work. And I go, oh, that's wonderful. I don't want to do that. So I like this because we could think of that bit at the left side being as part of that iteration. And I think you said you could have daily stand-ups about your discovery work, not just about the delivery work. Is that what I understood? Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah, and the thing I like is that we're all on this journey together, and it's interesting when you apply this across the organization, because while we talk a lot about cross-functionality, cross-functional teams, where it gets really powerful is having cross-organizational teams. So it's a way of all of us being able to share what we do. And, you know, I find that UX people love it because suddenly they can get people more on the right loop, the agilists, to understand what's going on the left, and vice versa when things are getting too much in researchy mode. So you'll notice the language will change. People will start going, hey, are we getting too right loop? Do we need to do some more left loop? Or, hey, are we really getting anything out this week, or are we stuck in the left loop? So it's that way just to get people moving, but moving together. And I think that's been the difficult place. I've always seen, you know, this idea that design thinking is something that we do as a one-off workshop or a phase. We throw it over the fence and that's all we do. And that's the beginning of it. But you need to get that shared language. And I think that's why having a really visual, you can see where everything fits, can help. Yeah, I like that observation, Mara.
This was something that I shared with a company that I'm in. I shared it with them actually a couple of months ago, just to help them realize that there's no clear cut between sort of thinking and delivery. And just walking them through the Mobius loop at a very high level, it created a sense of empathy on both sides. So our delivery teams also understood there's a ton of work that's required to go into the thinking and the design of features before it comes to us. But then also on the UX and the design side, you know, as much as we go into delivery, we still need to be in touch with part of the delivery cycle just to see the feedback and see the results and see, have we even built the right thing? Are we building it in the right way? And this has really set some light bulbs off in the organization or the teams that I'm in. And they're looking at ways of collaborating more clearly with each other, but more deeply with each other too, which is great. It's a fantastic tool.
Thank you.
Gabrielle, how often have you had a chance to see the team going all the way to discussing the why? So you have done some work, you have gone through all of this, and then it seems like we really need to go back to the why again.
Yeah, we do it constantly. I mean, it's really, you know, even, you know, it was interesting. There was a day, which everyone's going to laugh on this call, but I was sitting here going, oh my God, I've got so much work, all these different priorities. Oh, what do I do? I feel like I've been torn in a million different ways. I went, oh my God, I've forgotten to use Mobius. So I laid out Mobius for Mobius, you know, what's it really all about? And I should have time-lapsed it myself because it was fascinating how I thought it was super clear, but every time it's a really interesting push because I keep having to come back to, are these the right outcomes? Have I really, really understood them well? And it triggered, I need to do a bit more research because already things have changed as we're using it more in different ways. And so I found, yeah, even myself, who should be good at this, I keep uncovering a deeper understanding of why. And every time I do that, refresh and keep looking, because I use the 3 maps myself. I find that just so easy to see it. And every time I keep looking back, because I have this thing, I get kind of panicky during the week if I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing to improve the outcomes? And if I'm not actionable, for example, we're redesigning, we're about to push the new website. And I was in this design mode going, oh, it has to be more perfect, you know. And I went, oh my God, this question, what am I getting done this week to improve the outcomes? I just got the developer building it in tandem straight away. It's not, you know, and it's doing it more simultaneously, which sounds obvious, but, and then as I started baking it out, I went, oh, I'm getting stuck in making things too perfect. I'm a real perfectionist with design. And as soon as I kept looking at that outcome, is it moving? And a few clients have been saying that. They said, we just made all these assumptions that we had all this data and we didn't. And so we were back on why, because we realized all of our why was based on assumptions, not real data. And as soon as we started getting that in, it clarified, we saw the gaps. And I think that's that gap analysis. You can really see it clearly when you map it out. So that why, I'm constantly going back to it. If you're not, I kind of feel like you're probably, you know, trying to retrofit what you're already doing and coming up with a why to suit that rather than really understanding the why. Do you get that subtlety?
Yeah, that's so powerful though, because it's so hard to get a team in large organizations, or sometimes even in startups, right? They are so deep into now a delivery mode that asking them again why, they're like, why are you pulling us this? You are not helping here. You are pulling us back. And that's a different shift that we need to bring into the mindsets.
Actually, I get a lot of people saying, oh, we understand all that. We've done all that stuff. And I'm like, great, well, let's make it visible. Because actually another thing that's been happening is you'll find all that information's there, but it's very scattered, and it might live in the heads of a couple of people, but it's so buried and it's not clear to everybody else. So as soon as you say, okay, great, well, this should be really fast. Let's just quickly lay it out on the discovery map. It'll take you, maybe an hour. And then suddenly you untangle it. So that's fine. I never say, oh, really? It's not clear, but let's just quickly put it up. It'll take you no time. And that becomes clear. And also okay, well, if that's the real problem, how would you measure that we've achieved, the improvement? What does that look like? And as soon as you make it a little harder core, how you quantify it down, that creates that clarity. So yeah, we all believe we understand why. I constantly do, and I'm constantly wrong. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What other questions do you have?
Sorry. Hi. You talked earlier about, we mentioned earlier about cross-functional teams, and I'm interested to hear more about how, so typically, the agile teams are talking about cross-functionality, but that's not really the reality of their work. So how do you kind of get teams to work more cross-functionally, or how do you grow more cross-functional teams using this method?
Yeah, well, I think the idea is that because we go into this together, we're not separating things out. In Agile, we're always trying to get people to work together, but I think part of that is understanding the journey. I notice a lot of times you end up with a product person or a strategy person, and it's really decoupled. And I think it's the shared understanding. And because you can do this really quickly, like I can do a cross-organizational, cross-functional Mobius board, a 3 or 4 hour session where people can join. We just lay this out really quickly. And as soon as you get everybody into the journey, it just sort of breaks down those barriers where, there's a lot of politics and friction around our division owns this, we own that. As soon as you bring it down to the level of we all have these shared problems and shared outcomes, then it becomes a little clearer how we work together. So I think it just naturally leads to people understanding that to deliver this end-to-end strategy, we do need to work together. Where we align is on the outcomes. So that will break down. I mean, we have people focusing on certain parts of it, but I think because you get to see the big picture, all the pieces together assembled, it makes it a little easier to create that desire to be more cross-functional. So a good example, is that the Danish healthcare, we had UX people going into the field. Then I got them to play back where people were asking questions, getting stories told back. So the delivery team was more involved. Then they got so caught up in the stories, they had a desire to go into the field. So our UX people become facilitators, getting everybody out there. That's their job. It's all about making sure we align and communicate together. And you'll start seeing culturally the language shift. So many years ago, when I worked with, so I know Minwei and JF from Yahoo, I remember having separate lunch tables where UX design would be at one, developers, testers at another. And they spoke a very different language, but by the end, they were kind of eating chips off each other's plates, and they all understood because we just kept talking about this stuff as a group from word go. So it all became, it's like playing a game. I reckon we should design our process and our cultures like game design, where we all have this kind of end state we want to get to. And then it's all quite exciting trying to figure it out together. If you take away the problem and that kind of end state and the fun parts and just make people have to do one little piece of that game, you lose the entire experience. So I think we need to design our processes and our cultures by experience, right? In the same way we would like any game design. Does that make sense, Ger? Does that help answer what you're after?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Yeah, I'll let other people ask questions, but I might have some follow-ups as well.
Sure. Keep them coming. I love the questions. They're my favorite part. Robert, are you trying to speak? I think you're on mute.
The mouth was opening, but words were not coming out. That's what was going on. We were having a discussion about the placement of decide in the middle of the Mobius diagram. And this was for group 2. So group 2, feel free to help out with this question. We were speculating if decide, why it was there in the center. What places
Okay,
it there?
that's actually a very timely and excellent question, Robert. So I constantly evolve and experiment with the model itself. So originally we just had ideate in the middle, so it was a little simplified, but people like having the training wheels with it broken out. We had a lot of methods to fit in there. And at first I thought decide was there because we do initial prioritization. Then we refine it down into the how you're going to deliver. But then I realized in the last 2 months, I've been building so many, running these workshops that I realized what naturally happens is we come up with the ideas, the options, we then break it down into research, experimental, deliver, then we're prioritizing at the end. So while we do some rough priority, it really is happening. So then it was like, well, do we move these around? And that might actually be the next version, because I think it's actually about refining in that middle section and decide. It was just, I think part of it was people get really wedded to your model. You've got to be careful, right? You get so used to a way of doing it, and that crossroad arrow, people liked it being in the middle, but I suspect refine is probably the better way for that to go. So you might well see that model coming out, because I've been watching what people do. There's what you think people do and what they really do. And I've been watching, and people actually naturally start putting refinement in the middle. So you're actually validating some assumptions we've been testing out.
Hello, I got a question here. So it's about the loop itself. So we are going from Y, etc. And you have that arrow that is connected to Y, but not really. But same time having like a little bit touching the Y. So what is the reason for having that space in between? And same thing, it goes with adapt. So we have that arrow going to refine, but not touching it really. So can you just elaborate on that one, please?
Yeah, a lot of people wanted a starting point when they're brand new to it. So the reason we have the gap at the top is you're starting off. You know, no matter where you might be mid-flight in the middle of the product, but you actually always want to make sure that you've understood the why. So we're always going to ask that question, even if you're already generating a lot of options. So that first gap is really the starting point. The one on the right is what happens is we want to make sure that people do take a decision. Is this a time where we do want to go back around discovery? And you'll find the beginning, you're doing a lot more on the left loop, but often you're going around in the right loop. So there's that whole, do we discover more, deliver more? We want that to be a decision point. So we put it in so that we remind people, really think through which way should you be going? What's the best way to go at this point? Yeah.
So is it at the decision level that you make that direction, you take that direction, whether it's discovery or you continue on the right side, or is this at the adapt level?
Yeah, adapt's about a decision point. Do we do more discovery, more delivery, or do we recreate ourselves? Maybe we need to pivot and do something completely new, quite disruptive. Yeah. So think of adapt as a decision point. What do we do next? But really think through, should we just keep delivering? Because we often get stuck. I liked someone said it, I think it was Ardita earlier, who said, we get stuck in the now. There was something she said it in quite deep into the now. But anyway, and I think that's true. So we want to have that sort of disrupt to say, should we just keep delivering, or really do we want to rethink this and go back to the left?
Thank you very much.
What else do we have?
I was just curious. There are 3 colors used on the Mobius loop. What do they signify?
Oh, you guys are really into the model itself. Great questions. So I did blue for discovery because it's blue sky thinking. So that's more when we're in the, what are we doing while we're here? Then for me, the green for delivery is like a green light. So you've got full systems go, let's power things out. Then in the middle, like traffic lights, you've got the amber, where it's a decision point. So this is where you're kind of deciding which direction, we're waiting for the lights to change. So that was the color coding of it. And it really helped. I used to have many colors, but like anything, just simplifying. So all the cards that we have, the Mobius cards that I showed you earlier, trigger cards, they're in different color suites. And it really helps when you're designing stuff because I can quickly pull them out, understand basically what they're for. It's just a fast way of being able to organize them.
I got another question. When you're running a workshop to place the cards like this, if you're doing it with an organization that's working in a relatively older mode of thinking, so what we might refer to as waterfall, although that's a little disingenuous to linear planning, do they tend to arrange the cards differently on the model?
It's a really interesting question because I can't say that I come across many really traditional waterfall-y type shops anymore. Most people actually, what's more common is most people think they're really agile, but they're not that agile. But it could also be that I've just pivoted. So I tend to get early adopters and slightly people looking for a way to innovate in a better way. So that tends to be my audience. So it'd be interesting to see. I think what can sometimes help is while we can use these sort of models to put things in and make it more attractive, people going, oh, there's different ways of doing it. You can also get people to put post-it notes with some of the things they already do and get them to put that up around as well. So that way they can start, I find it easier to shift an organization without making, like I never go in and sell things like agile, right? People say, can you come in and make us agile? I'm like, well, let's just step back. So I use Mobius to say, what are your problems? Oh, why are you doing this? Why now? Okay, tell me about your customers. What are their needs? Okay, and if we manage to improve things, solve these problems, what would that look like? How would we measure it? So I use Mobius as my whole model going in, which they like because it's not about making you agile. It's about, are we solving your problems, achieving your outcomes? That's what we should be doing. So then we can go in and say, okay, well, to help you understand it, let's take what you already do and like. Let's start mapping that out around this. How would that look? Then people can see if I've already got gaps, if there's things they like. Like, you know, I can throw an old SWOT analysis in there. Still quite like it. Sometimes I just pull out all these different models. So some of, you know, the coach's deck is over 150 different methods that I just collect, and there's more all the time. Not to overwhelm people, but I notice I use very different approaches depending what I'm doing. If I'm working on continuous delivery, DevOps, back-end systems, it's a whole different suite of tools than when I'm doing strategy, big picture business modeling, right? So this is where you start people simply, but I think showing them what they already know fits, where does it fit, then there's things that can help them, or maybe a more fun, more interesting way of getting to that information. So it's not that anything we do is bad. I would never start from that point. I'd say, okay, here's what you're doing. Okay, well, so what are some of the problems? Well, it's really hard. It takes us a long time to get products to market. Oh, okay, well, do you think you're getting stuck in discovery too much? Oh, yeah, we probably are. Okay, well, how are some ways we could fix that? So use that as a model to get people comfortable rather than throw away what you know. Where does it fit? Or maybe there's a different way of doing it. It's like ninja coaching.
All right, so time is almost up. Thank you so much, everyone, for playing. I'm going to give the floor back to Artie.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for running this. So Monway and JF, thanks for bringing Gabby to us, and thanks for organizing and running everything. This was fantastic. Gabby, so many golden nuggets in everything you said. I'm pretty sure that everyone got a lot out of this, and even a couple of people that had to drop a little 5 minutes earlier, they left with a lot of good feedback. So this was one of the best sessions we probably ever had. So interactive and so so creative. So thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your experience with us, and thank you for walking us through this. Lovely to have you, and you can join us anytime if you want, if you have time.
Yeah, I'd love to come back. I think it's really nice to check in, and if people start using this, I'd be really happy to, we could do a little coaching clinic or something. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
And just a quick mention, by the way, you've all been fantastic. Great questions, like really interesting questions today. So back at you. Really good session.
Fantastic.
A new website's going to launch sometime next week. So there's a bit of outdated stuff up there at the moment. So wait, if you want the new maps, check them next week on mobiusloop.com, and hopefully we'll see more of you. It was great. Thank you so much. And thanks again, whole team, for organizing it. You're brilliant.
Yeah, thank you. The recording will be in place, yes, for people that couldn't attend, but they registered. We had way more people registered, but I guess it's that time of the day. And I think the recording is going to be posted, so more questions probably will come up, and to your point, follow up. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day or the evening.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone, and stop the recording.